Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dr. Chera Reid from Freedom Dreams and Philanthropy, and we are so glad you're here. I am living and loving these songs that you're dropping in the chat, responding to this question, what's a song that makes you feel free? I feel like we are already winning, whatever winning means with this playlist. So thank you for participating, for playing along. My pronouns are she, her. I'm participating today from Anishinaabe land, so the state of Michigan. And I would describe myself in terms of physical appearance as a light-skinned Black woman. I am a youthful, early middle-aged person. I have on a vibrant blue shirt, and I have styled my hair in longish locks in a bob. And we say welcome to our virtual event series launch for Freedom Dreams and Philanthropy. We're a collaborative of social sector professionals who embrace the tradition of freedom dreaming to imagine what our field and our institutions could and must be to center racial justice. This is work that is fundamentally about remaking the world in service to our collective liberation. So I'm here today with our team and with all of you. And so I'm going to invite my team members, Efrain and Trinel, to please say hello.
Hello, everyone. Hola a todos. I'm Efrain Gutierrez. My pronouns are he and they, and I am participating today from Ohlone land in San Francisco in the Bay Area. I'm a tall, light-skinned Latino with glasses, wearing like a dress shirt, but with a beautiful cape, a red cape that my mom gave me to remind me of her embrace and her love. So I'm wearing that today. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here and get this going. So I'll pass it to Trinel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Trinel. My pronouns are he, him. I'm currently on Tongva land here in LA. I would describe myself as an unambiguous dark-skinned Black man with stylishly short locks, a beard, and a mustache. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you, team. And thank you again, everybody, for being here with us. And so today is the first and definitely not the last of virtual events and engagements from Freedom Dreams and Philanthropy. This work is collaborative, and we're going to be inviting you in to participate, collaborate, join with us today and throughout. And the purpose really of our time together today is about grounding, and it's about invitation. So as we were thinking about our intent for this virtual event launch, we said we really want to tap into the whole of who we are versus leading with like goals. We could give you 25 goals. And we said, well, what do we want folks to think, to feel, to be able to do in this? And so we're sharing those with you. So in terms of thinking, what we have in mind today as our intent is to really recognize that there are ways forward. There are ways to tap into the support that we need to go forward as we continue the freedom struggles toward our collective liberation and really remaking the world that is inclusive, that is fair, that is just. And we also want this way forward to not feel like it's something that's like a weight on your individual shoulders. So this is a space for us to be in it together, to support one another, to go forward. And related to that, in terms of feeling, we want everyone to walk away today feeling like, you know what, I'm not alone. I might be the only one of me in my organization, in my context, but I'm definitely not actually alone. I am here, I am present, I am seen. We want you to have a sense of feeling that like, you know what, agency is in the present tense, not just a future state, right? This is work that is about connecting to who we are and also connecting to and never being alone because we're connected to the freedom dreams of our ancestors, of our lineages, of those who come before us, and also of everybody who is joining and watching and listening and being present with us. And then in terms of doing, we said, let's see if we might identify one way, not all the ways, today, one way, one thing that you can do to step into the future that you desire, step into the future that you deserve. And so with that, we're inviting you into your humanity, not something that you have to earn or fix or do anything, but that you have today. We're inviting you into praxis, which we're going to define a little bit later. And what we say in that, if any of what we're going to talk about today is relevant to philanthropy and what we pick up for philanthropy, then we will have done our jobs. We will have done what we came to do, if you have one thing that you can take with you. And so we're gathering today to discuss, what is freedom dreaming? Where does it come from? And moreover, why does philanthropy, or should, or might philanthropy care? So we are here to move into what a liberatory practice of dreaming and philanthropy could be, and what that could make possible. And so before we do that, though, we're going to ground ourselves. We're going to ground this conversation. And I'm going to pass it over to my friend and colleague, Efrain.
Thank you so much, Chera. Part of freedom dreaming and part of why it's so appealing to me is because of all the conversation around how the arts are an important part of this work and how poetry can help us produce the consciousness and the language that can allow us to articulate collective visions for our liberation. So I want to start us off with a poem that I wrote a few months ago. I attended an event called The Dream Worlds, Wandering in the Afroscene, Afrofuturism, and Womanism at the End of the World, that was organized by the Rooted Global Village. And instead of coming up with notes or taking notes during the event, I created a poem at the end of the event. It was a very powerful event, and I want to just share it with you as a way to ground us and start us in the conversation. So, on dreaming, we fight by not fighting. We don't fight, we dream. For dreaming is not practical or logical or useful. Dreaming is outside, boundless. Dreaming is a mistake, failure as liberation, misspelling celebration. I don't want to be human. I am free. I am me. And with that, I want to invite you to, at least in the next hour, really just ground yourself on the fact that there is nothing to prove. There is nothing you have to take to your organization today. We're not going to give you 3 things. We really just want you to know that you made it. And just being here and being part of this experience is already transforming us. So grab your coffee, grab your tea, light the candle, grab a beer. I don't know, it's early maybe for most. But really just understand that a lot of what's happening around us, it's out of our control, but that doesn't mean that we cannot be here in this moment. And particularly for those in philanthropy, I do want to just make it very clear that a lot of that is not you. Like a lot of the limitations that you're feeling in your work, a lot of the structures that you see don't serve us, are real. You are the one, for those of us who are trying to do something different, who believe in mutuality and who wants to see a different world. Some of those orthodoxies are really there to tell us that we should go back in line. And what we're saying in this hour is we're just going to be together. And I want to bring the lineage of my queer transcestors and ancestors, and also my immigrant ancestors, and saying, we are chosen family. I think one of the big powers of the communities that I come from is that idea that independently of where you come from, or independently of whether the people that are supposed to love you and care for you or not, you find your people, and you find those that understand you, see you, and will put you in your place when it's needed. And I want us to be that for each other in this hour. And I also think that's part of the work that we want to start doing with Freedom Dreams. So just to ground us on what we're doing with Freedom Dreams and Philanthropy specifically, this is part of the work that we're doing. You have the slide in front of you. I'm not going to read it. But this idea of creating spaces where institutional philanthropy can dream collectively and organize for action, this is part of that invitation that we are providing, and of course also providing guidance and starting to talk about praxis. So welcome, you're here, you made it. Let's have fun and let's explore. So now I'm going to pass it to Chera to talk a little bit about the Black radical tradition of freedom dreaming.
Yeah, thanks so much, Efrain. That was a really beautiful poem. So I am going to talk a little bit about how we got here. And what I mean is how we got here as Dr. Trinel Torian, Efrain Gutierrez, and myself with Freedom Dreams and Philanthropy as a body of work. And I'm going to do that by talking first a little bit about like where I come from and why this work. And so I have to start by giving a shout out to my dad and to my mom. My parents are here. If you're participating live, they're watching and supporting right now. And I feel so thankful for that. And it's also my dad's birthday, if you're watching live. So I'm going to ask you, if you will, pick an emoji. Let's celebrate a heart. Because my parents are here and they are supporting me in this. And it's just a beautiful thing. So thank you. And thank you to my parents, Catherine and Charles Reid. So to say a word about where did this project, this collective, where are we coming from? I worked at the Kresge Foundation for 7 years. I had a beautiful job, actually had 2 beautiful jobs while I was there. I came as a program officer in higher education. I have a PhD in higher education from NYU. I was doing the thing, right? I got to be a higher ed program officer at the time when President Obama was in office. First Lady Michelle Obama was doing Reach Higher. It was a really good time to be in higher education. A couple of years in, I got tapped to build a new area of work at the foundation, strategic learning, research, and evaluation. I had no idea what that actually meant, but sure, I had a PhD. And yes, I had worked at MDRC with Trinel earlier in my career. And so I said, eventually, okay, I will try that. And I did it, and I did the most. It was at the time when the foundation was also trying to figure out what its commitment to equity might be. I know nobody here has ever heard of that or been involved in that. I say that with a bit of a laugh. But I was doing the most and doing it mostly well. And what happened also in that time is I started to feel like, but what am I really here for? What is this about? Why do I do this every day? I was feeling a bit disconnected from my most creative self. And so I said, well, how can I get grounded? Where should I go? And part of what I did was I picked up 2 books. One was a brand new book, Kianga Yamata Taylor's book, How We Get Free, which is a follow-on to the Combahee River Collective, right? Going all the way back, Harriet Tubman, Combahee River Collective, right? The other book I picked up was almost 20 years old. And that book is Freedom Dreams, The Black Radical Imagination by Robin D.G. Kelley. And both of those books I carried around with me for probably a year, trying to say, it's like kind of sense into, well, what might my work be? What is this purpose that I'm really being called into? And we're going to talk more about freedom dreaming as we go, for sure. And what it led me to eventually was the recognition that it was time for me to transition out of the foundation, out of 7 years of, beautiful work, doing the most, a time of great growth and evolution at the foundation. And I found myself at the Center for Evaluation Innovation, where I'm the co-executive director, but with some space. And started to have, really this sense that I wonder, could we hear the freedom dreams? Could we tap into the Black radical imagination, the radical imagination of CEOs, and moreover, CEOs of color in philanthropy? Would people be willing to step outside of their institutional voices, outside of what you might read on a website? And shout out to my friend and colleague, Geraldine Coffey, because she was, unbeknown to me, having conversations with Efrain Gutierrez, and we had met years before through some shared work, and said, you two need to talk. And so I'm going to pause there and Efrain join.
Thank you, Chera. Yeah, Freedom Dreams came for me at a very particular moment in my life. I think similarly to your story, Chera, I was in many ways achieving the promised land of competition, comparison, and capitalism. I became the first director of evaluation for the Obama Foundation, and I don't think in my career I ever took the time to really think about why I was pursuing certain things or doing or going about life in the ways that I was going about life. And a lot of what I was doing was informed with what was expected from me, which happens to a lot of cisgender men. And I think I was talking to Geraldine Coffey because, I started to have high anxiety, and it doesn't really have to do with I don't necessarily want to talk about any institution that I was working for. I think that it was just a personal journey that I needed to go through. I think if I remember correctly, Geraldine Coffey said, sweetie, you're a beautiful man, but you need some time, you need to heal. And we're gonna get you, we're gonna do that. So it was high anxiety. I just didn't know what was happening with me, if I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, So I reached out to Chera, and we started talking, and I did not understand at that point that this work was gonna be an important part of my healing process, and that surrounding myself with Octavia Butler, Afrofuturism, with bell hooks, and started to get into all of this work and this lineage, was just gonna be such a healing and beautiful space for me to really start to scrutinize and think about my masculinity, and think about the ways in which patriarchal masculinity hurt me, and just really start to listen to myself more, which I think it's what Freedom Dreams is about. At least in the way that resonates for me, is just really respecting yourself independently of binaries, independently of just listen, love yourself enough to respect what you think and what you want, what you desire. So that's how Chera and I started to work together, and we were like, are the CEOs gonna respond to our calls? And oh my God, what are we gonna ask them? And what if they just stay in their institutional voice, and then we just hear the same things? And it was a wonderful experience. I think it's just really affirming to see that we were able to create spaces where where folks were sharing with us their freedom dreams. So I'll stop right there, and I'll let Trinel also just tell us a little bit more about how he got involved.
Yeah, thanks, Efrain. As Chera mentioned, I know her from working at MDRC. That was over 10 years ago. And after MDRC, I went to Berkeley to get my PhD. And it was interesting when I reconnected with Chera, I was talking to her about the conventions and constraints around my voice and my perspective in academia. For those of you who have been in academia, you know there's all kinds of racialized and classed and gendered notions about whose insights, whose reasoning is actual legitimate science. And I was struggling with that. You know, I was struggling with wanting to do work that was not just, you know, poverty porn for rich white people, right? I wanted to do work that really empowered my community. I wanted to do work that helped deal with educational inequality, so on and so forth. I wanted to bring in theory and critiques from education, from African-American studies, from Mexican-American studies, and all these things like that, right? And I felt like that just wasn't the place. And little did I know, you know, I thought I was going to Berkeley and I was going to be in this super open and liberal place. And there were just so many constraints, right? Especially in my discipline, I'm a sociologist. And so when I spoke to Chera, I mean, I was just shocked by how, not shocked, but I was the similarity in how we talked about our position and place and in our fields, and the frustrations that and difficulties were just so stark that I became really interested in the work. And obviously too, the whole goal of transformation that this work has at its core really spoke to me, because this is something that I was grappling with. How does my work and how do my insights contribute to social transformation, right? And how do I make them contribute? A lot of times they tell sociologists, you're not meant to change the world, you're just meant to explain it, right? And that's not enough for me. And I was hearing the same urgency and from Efrain and Chera, and so it really felt natural to join in on this work. In addition to the fact that, you know, we're talking to CEOs of color and so on and so forth, and I'm really interested in organizations and culture. And so it just felt like a match in so many ways. And little did I know that I would be personally transformed by this work. And I'm sure you too could speak to that as well. But it's amazing how we all got together.
Yes, thank you for sharing. So I'm going to go back up just quickly to say that what is freedom dreaming? We're going to say a little bit more about that in just a minute. But the idea behind it is that, and you know, I don't know if anybody's on from the Mellon Foundation, they actually have this on the walls. It says, freedom is always the dream, and always the dream is freedom. And it is really honoring the long Black radical tradition of imagining our freedom, imagining a world where, well, we're going to get more into it, so I won't say all of that, but it is about that world of imagining. And the book Freedom Dreams is really speaking to a history of Black freedom movements over the 20th century. So more on that to come. But the thing I think too that's important for us to hear right now is that the work is about always moving toward new visions, so that, as Robin D.G. Kelley has said, we know what we have a sense more of what we can build, so that we not only know what to knock down, so that we're not confused, rudderless, and cynical. And he says, we forget making a revolution is not a series of clever maneuvers and tactics, but a process that can and must transform us. And I say the can and must transform us because as we talk about our origin story as a team, and ultimately the body of work and collaborative that we're inviting everyone here into, this is work that can and must transform us. And it is work that is not about clever maneuvers and tactics, but it is about all of us together making revolution. And so we are inviting. And I'm going to pass it to Trinel to just say another word about how this work connects not only to the very long-standing, generations-long Black radical tradition and Black freedom struggles, but to other movements.
Mhm. Yeah, since Freedom Dreams was published, the Black radical imagination, as Robin Kelley explicated it, has expanded to include movements and dreams beyond what he originally imagined. There's a lot of connections with queer and trans liberation movements. And interestingly enough, they've increasingly shared leadership with a lot of Black radical movements like Black Lives Matter, right? And you've seen a lot more of queer and trans liberation framings being a part of Black radical movements as well. Disability justice, for example, employs a lot of abolitionist frameworks. A lot of disability justice folks talk a lot about the interactions between race and ableism and how ableism is exacerbated in the experiences of people of color, queer people as well, right? And more likely to be institutionalized and arrested and so on and so forth. And even decolonial and indigenous thought has offered a challenging complement to what Robin D.G. Kelley explicated originally. In his book, in Robin D.G. Kelley's book, he talks a lot about what self-determination has looked like for Black folks. And a lot of times it's been about land ownership and making your own community, your own world, right? Talk about the Maroon colonies and other Black folks who separated off and created their own communities. But decolonial thinkers are like, hey, that also occurred in the context of colonialism. That land that was a part of self-determination for Black people at different periods was stolen land, right? And so how do we think about what Black liberation looks like in the context of colonialism, and how do we push back against that while also claiming self-determination? And so there's so many connections, and this is only a few, but to movements outside of Black radical movements. And so what Robin Kelley's work really is a call for people to engage with it, regardless of what their political persuasions are, their particular political interests are. There's room and space and lots of things to draw on from the Black radical tradition.
Thank you. Well, and since we're already there, we have this question for you. And we'll say a little bit more about freedom dreaming, a little more grounding. But first, we want to pick up, what does freedom dreaming mean to you? And we see that you already letting us know what that means. Right. And Trinel, do you want to say another word about what we're seeing as the Minty is happening here?
Yeah, so what we're seeing here, which is amazing, I'm loving how this is displaying. These are your responses about what freedom dreaming means to you. And these adjectives are great: community, possibility, courage, liberation. Definitely, we resonate with a lot of those. I mean, freedom dreaming as a concept is transnational, transgenerational, transcultural. And so there might even be other concepts, perhaps that you're familiar with, adjacent ideas from the African diaspora, other cultures, literatures or perspectives that you engage with. I encourage you guys to put in the chat if there are similar concepts to freedom dreaming that you're aware of, to uplift them. I know a common one is radical imagination, right? It tends to be a term used a lot in political conversations, but there may be others. So I encourage you to drop those in the chat.
Mm-hmm. And if we can we go back to slide 6, please, Laura? So something that we want to make very clear is that sometimes there is difficulty in the philanthropic sector, in the field, to understand what we're doing with bringing the idea of freedom dreaming to philanthropy. And I want to make sure that there is an understanding that this is not just a new framework that we're trying to create to do consulting work, although there might be consulting work at some point. It's not necessarily a structure. It's truly an invitation. And the reason why I'm showing slide 6 right now is to show you how there are like different concepts and ideas that have the same spirit. And there are like different people that are already doing this work, have done this work, and will do this work. We truly are just coming in conversation with all of these different with all these, all these folks working towards liberation and mutuality. You can see there some CUNY already also thinking about freedom dreaming and thinking about visualizing the future that we want to live in and looking for the tools that will take us there. I really like Ruha Benjamin's definition of viral justice, not freedom dreaming, where she talks about how, as a world building rubric, it is both anticipatory and inventive. And I love these two questions. She's asking, what if, while stubbornly invested in the here and now, demanding why wait? And I think that's the key. That is not that we're just thinking about the future. We are making the future a reality now for ourselves and those we interact with. And I think for me, that has been very liberatory. It has allowed me to think about whether when I'm working with a client and I see some constraints, I'm thinking about the ways in which I can invite some of my clients in my consulting work that is outside of Freedom Dream to participate in a little bit more dreaming and more freedom. How do we create that space? Understanding that maybe not everything is gonna change right now, and that's okay. So I also just want to bring the idea that freedom dreaming, it's about small things. Sometimes it's about being kind to your friends or surrounding yourself with chosen family, as I mentioned before. It can be immediate, and it's not frivolous to dream on seemingly small things. It's respecting ourselves, it's taking care of ourselves, it's surrounding ourselves with love, with joy. And yeah, it looked like disability justice, as Trinel was talking about, the different intersections, queer liberation, bodily autonomy. This comes from the National Equity Project. So there are different organizations, different people doing this work. This is the frame, this is the spirit of how we're bringing this work to philanthropy. And we want to make sure that we bring it in conversation with all of those doing already the work. So now we can go back, Chera, go back to slide 9 now. It's Trinel, right? Yeah, we're going to praxis.
So as Efrain said, we are drawing on and in conversation with people already doing this work, but we do also have a very particular perspective on what freedom dreaming is. For us, it's an active term, it's a verb, it's iterative. We're using the term praxis. Here we have 2 quotes here from Paulo Freire, who is a very influential a Brazilian scholar of education, probably one of the most influential of the 20th century. And he describes praxis as reflection and action upon the world in order to transform it. And so really for Freire, praxis is an iterative process. It's reflection and action centered on the transformation of the world, right? And what's not here is that through this action and reflection, we develop theory about the nature of injustice, theory about what transformative practice should look like, right? And we come to increasingly embody that theory through our action. And so that theory actually becomes a part of our reflection as well. And we're refining it based on what we're seeing in the world. So freedom dreaming for us can look like reflection on what is, right? Being rooted in what is, knowing how it works, knowing how injustice works, knowing who's affected, right? But also what can be. And then when you kind of get in that orientation, you start to look for opportunities, steps that you can take in the direction of what we want. As Efrain said, they can be small steps, right? They can be, coming into community with people, right? And they can be bigger steps, right? And what you do is then check on yourself, check in on how you're feeling, check in on how the world responds, how structures respond to your new orientation, right? And then that becomes an object of your reflection. And you reflect on it, and then you refine that action and repeat. And so there's, again, this iterative process that we're encouraging. And this is really, in the second quote here, it's a labor, right? And this is a humanist project. And I want to talk about what I mean by labor here. Freire talks about how dreaming and praxis and creating and changing our world is really our vocation as humans. We're not meant to just sit and accept and internalize an unjust reality. But in for Freire that dehumanizes us. We're really meant to act and alter to change it, to create history, not just be objects of history. So practice is really about reclaiming our humanity and agency in the face of injustice, right? And what ends up happening is this personal and societal transformation. So it's not just changing structures, but you change in the process. You become more human. If I don't know, some people might be familiar with Freire, but you can kind of hear in this that there is a little bit of a Marxism. Essentially, Freire believes it's not just the structures in society that's the problem, but our consciousness that's the problem, right? We internalize oppressive systems, we internalize the terms, the guidelines, the concepts that create and reproduce our system, right? And some ways we find security and identity in it, right? We become sub-oppressors, we oppress ourselves, we oppress others. And so this work really isn't easy when it's embedded in your consciousness. So he calls the work labor. He calls liberation a childbirth. He says freedom is a conquest. It's not given as a gift, right? But the outcome of that labor is, as this quote says, you're human. You become more human, right? And you're human in the process of freedom. I think I like the second quote too, because it talks about how this is not an end state, an end goal. It's not a linear process, right? It's ongoing. You're going to be in the process of achieving freedom. And so for us, freedom Dreams as Praxis really has meant personal transformation. We've seen it in our work and the way we've tried to create a word culture and a culture around our work that makes sense for us and that feels liberatory, right? And we try it out and we learn and we test it. And even right now, we're in our praxis, speaking to you guys and trying out some concepts and sharing kind of what the grounding of our work is, and getting your reaction is part of how we're going to refine our practice and develop theory about how transformative practice and philanthropy might look. So thank you for participating in our praxis.
I love that. And Trinel, as you were speaking, you were reminding me of one, Paulo Freire's work, that it was born in a time of revolution, right, and change in Brazil. Mm-hmm. And so much of the big moves, big societal shifts, one, how much they happen in the midst of the most difficult circumstances and times, right? They happen in those times when people are so pressed, and where we could retreat, where we could, put our heads down and accept the status quo. And it reminds me too of how enduring these beautiful concepts are of freedom dreaming, of praxis. And I will share a quick story, which is here in the Detroit area, which is one of the inspirations for Robin D.G. Kelley's work. It is Grace Lee and Jimmy James Boggs. And I recently, in the last few months, had the opportunity, one, to connect with Robin. We literally ran into each other. Well, I saw him in the airport in Chicago, so I ran into him because I went over and introduced myself. But what has happened, in part as a result of this transformative work for me on a personal level, is I've been able to start building another kind of community where I live. I have had the opportunity to visit the Boggs Center a few times. I've gotten to really learn more about the history of the place that I call home. Spending time on the east side of Detroit, I'm watching freedom growers, freedom dreams, people doing really beautiful visionary work in the arts, in food justice, and land back, reclaiming. And it's really been powerful to see people picking up and continuing to dream, continuing to put their work in praxis. And so it's coming alive for me in really beautiful ways right where I live. So wanted to share that. In praxis, I will say too, for me, is a concept that I was introduced to when I was in college. And it was in the concept around teaching, right? And it was like, what do you want to, what's the purpose of education? Was the question, right? If you're going to be an educator, and that was my intent at that time, what is the purpose of education? Are you showing up for education for liberation? And I am. I'm also a mother. I am. And it's beautiful just to be grounded in these concepts, to hear the resonance of them across time. And again, for everyone here, to invite you into praxis with us.
Mhm. And there is a particular way in which, and we will explore this as part of our work, but there is something to say about the world or the worlds that we inhabit as people that work close to money, close to in philanthropy, and how to keep ourselves in praxis, understanding power dynamics and making choices and just staying true to the practice and to the work and managing relationships. And it's just, for me, that's been the part that has been the most helpful, and that sometimes I still need to be reminded, right, that the system is going to try to bring you back, capitalism, all of these things, come back here, like that's why are you doing that other thing? And it's important to be reminded of the why and the wisdom that we all have within us and what we're trying to build.
Efrain, do you want to take us to the invitation?
So we go now?
Yeah,
Sure.
I think we should go there.
Okay, let's do it, folks. So I already, in my comment, I was already starting to allude to this, but I think something that we've been reflecting on from the interviews and just in general when we go to the bar, we all know, when we go to the bar, when we go to the coffee shop with folks that are working in philanthropy, there is sometimes a lot of heartbreak with the idea that we come to philanthropy to do big things, and then we're confronted with realities that sometimes don't fit what our ability to show our best selves and to do the work that we think is required. And I think I want to just make an invitation for all of us to just close your eyes if you wish, or stay where you're at, but just be very present with your body and think about what is your freedom dream for your society, for our society. Who is there? What are they doing? What does it feel like? Just take a second to think about it. Whatever comes to mind, that's what is. No right or wrong. And then when you start thinking about your work and when you start thinking about where you're situated in life, what is maybe one thing that you can do to get closer to that future? Either in your practice, in the way you treat others, it's maybe the way in which you show up for your team, or maybe it's a note of thank you to somebody that helped you. Whatever you think that will take you closer. And we want you to take that with you and think about and reflect on how that can become part of your praxis, part of how you move into the world. All right. It is almost always the little things, says Chera. It is.
Yeah, the little things.
Yeah, it does. It feels like it feels like strategic philanthropy. I mean, I'm going into 1 second. Strategic philanthropy took us to trying to control everything, to system change, which is trying to change everything by changing this little thing. And this is like turning all of that in some ways in its head and saying, well, it's us. It's the little changes that we do and the way that we treat each other. And if we all do it, that's how revolution happens. That's how change happens.
Yeah.
And I do want to be careful not to, it's so easy for us to get into contrasting and saying, freedom dreaming is on this side and all of these things are on the other. I want to make sure we don't go there. I think we are actually inviting the idea of either that both end and the idea that everything is context and nuance. So I'll stop there because I'll just go on a larger tangent, and I'll pass it to Chera to talk about some of the reflections from what we hear from leaders of color.
Yeah, well, this is the beginning of engaging with us as Freedom Dreams and Philanthropy. And this is really something that's not for us to possess as the three here. It's something for all of us, and it's an invitation. So to be continued, Efrain, I'll just say that, right?
Yes.
To be continued. And what we want to share next is a little preview of what we heard from our research interviews. So just to back up, over the last year or so, we got to prove a concept, y'all. Like, that was really cool. We worried and did all the usual hand wringing of learned people who are really good at performing in institutions, elite ones even. And we did are they gonna care? Is anybody gonna take our call? And do we have to go in person in COVID? And oh my gosh, the Delta variant. What will we do? And then we calmed down and said, it's time to start. Let's start. And so we started asking folks for an hour of sharing space with us. We prioritize people, and everyone self-identifies as a person of color and is a president or executive director, CEO of a foundation. We prioritize for this first phase of research those leaders of color who are working in endowed philanthropy, primarily, right? And they range from big national global funders to regional place-based funders, range and asset size, all of those things. And so I guess one thing too, just to note, because some people ask, are there that many leaders of color, presidents and CEOs, executive directors in philanthropy? And that's a win. Answer is resoundingly yes. Because we didn't talk to everybody. We talked to just over 25 folks for this first phase of work. And we started to hear some things that were quite similar. And so we said, let's pause with the interviews and let's do some more of our sense making and begin to share with the field. Because if there was an urgency for us, we said, we actually have proven the concept that we need to do something called Freedom Dreams and Philanthropy. And it should be a collaborative, and we invite people in and we make it together. And so what did we hear? We're going to preview 3 findings. These findings we're going to spend a lot more time on in our subsequent events. So please come back and join us. And so a first finding is that leaders of color's dreams for a just multiracial democracy were unified in centering love for humankind. So when we go back to that early definition, maybe that decades, generations, actually centuries long definition of philanthropy, it is about love for humankind. And our leaders of color that we interviewed were speaking to, at the end of the day, that is what this is about. That is the definition, the concept that they're showing up for. And so it means meeting basic material needs, to be sure. People talked about housing, food security, access to safety, education for the young ones around them, and the needs for love and for belonging. And so their freedom dreams are about everyone having a place, if you will, that is a place of freedom, of security, of love, and of belonging. And it may not sound that radical to hear. I just, a little commentary on that is that nobody spoke about sort of fame, fortune, or about individuals, really. This was about really an emphasis on the collective and a desire for people to have what they need and the conditions met so that everyone has a place of belonging and thriving.
Leaders of color also dream of a world where philanthropy doesn't exist. And I want to temper this and say that, essentially they were dreaming of worlds where people were thriving. Everyone was thriving, going back to what Chera just shared. Everybody's basic material needs are met. Needs around love and belonging are met, right? And so for them, the accumulation of wealth in the hands of a few was really incompatible with that kind of reality. So what they really were saying was that philanthropy, if it was to exist, wouldn't exist in its current form, right? And some of the alternatives seem to suggest that a new philanthropy would be more communal, more democratic. And so leaders of color are really amazing in that they're dreaming of their impression of philanthropy as we talked to them, which was changing as a result of how their dreams elaborated over the course of the conversation. Essentially, it made no sense by the end of our conversation that philanthropy as it is now would exist. And so I thought that was also a really powerful thing about our interviews.
And finally, we also found that leaders of color come to philanthropy wanting to do big things for communities and society. And they experience professional heartbreak that creates internal conflict and what we're calling a crisis of faith. People sometimes come from other sectors or from movement, and sometimes they come to institutions that have been struggling for a while, or the fundamental structure of philanthropy, of having this board of directors that sometimes is not necessarily in touch with what's happening with communities. All of these different aspects of how these leaders enter philanthropy made them start to think that sometimes it was hard for them to realize those big dreams that they had. So they were experiencing a lot of heartbreak, and we want to explore that, what that means and how that looks like. I think I would just say that one of our interviewees at some point said during the interview, "Oh my God, I'm sharing more with you than I have shared with my board about my dreams." And that's heartbreaking. That they're not able to. So, and just the fact that the institutions and the process, the structures have not created the space for some of these leaders to actually be able to share with those who are supposed to be there to support them what they see as their freedom dreams. It's part of the heartbreak. And the last thing I'll say is, but they stay there, and we scrutinize why they stay there. And there was still some faith in being able to do something within philanthropy. And some of them were questioning whether to leave the field, of course. But we will explore more and dig deeper when we continue with our events. But we wanted to give you a little bit of an understanding. I'll pass it to Chera. I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, we're good because we're beginning. This is again our virtual event launch. More to come. So over the next few virtual events, we're going to be delving into these findings and inviting more people into the conversation with us. Things that you can do in the meantime, we would love it if you would give us a follow on social media. We have our website, freedomdreamsphilanthropy.org. We welcome your feedback. We welcome your comments. We're going to send out a really quick follow-up from this that offers ways to be supportive of the work, ways to be in conversation with it. We will be sharing our slides and a recording from today. And so we invite you to, hit forward, send it out to people, share it in your networks, repost it as well. And we'll soon be sending out a link to our next event, which is going to be at the end of August. So that's coming really soon. And we'll also be sharing some recommendations. We've been reading a lot, talking with a lot of folks over the last nearly 2 years. So we've got books, we've got podcasts, now we got a song list. Thanks to everybody here. So thank you for co-curating that playlist with us. We'll be sharing that out as well. So those are our songs that really help us to feel free. So thank you for that. And with that, we just say we appreciate you. We're so glad that you took the time to be here with us. There's more to come. And thank you for sharing space with us today.